Picture this for a second. It's January 23rd, 2002. You've got this bustling, hazy street in Karachi, Pakistan. Total chaos, horns blaring, people everywhere. And right in the middle of it all, an American journalist steps onto the pavement. He's on the trail of a massive story, the kind he hopes will expose a global terror network. A white car pulls up, windows completely blacked out. Driven by this absolute need to uncover the truth, he gets in. The car merges into the chaotic traffic, and, just like that, he vanishes.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the reality of the Daniel Pearl case, a journalist versus terrorists. We're going to untangle one of the most tragic, complex true crime webs in modern history. We'll break down exactly how a dedicated reporter got lured into a devastating trap, the terrifying timeline of his captivity, and, honestly, the incredibly frustrating decades-long quest for justice that followed.
Section 1. The Fateful Night.
So the clock is ticking. At 18:30 hours, Daniel grabs a taxi heading to Karachi's famous Village restaurant. His big interview is set for 1900 hours. Now, right before leaving, he promised his pregnant wife, Marianne, and his friend, journalist Usra Namani, that he'd be back home by 2100 hours. He literally waved goodbye through the taxi window with a smile, completely unaware it would be their very last memory of him. But when he gets to the restaurant, a sudden phone call changes the meeting spot for security reasons. And that's exactly when that white car showed up.
Section 2. Chasing the Shoe Bomber. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth was Daniel Pearl getting into that car in the first place? Well, to understand that, we have to rewind a bit to the post-9/11 world. The whole globe was basically on high alert. Just 3 months after 9/11, in December 2001, a British-born guy named Richard Reed tried to blow up a flight from Paris to Miami. He actually tried to detonate explosives hidden right in his shoes mid-flight. Passengers managed to tackle him, but this terrifying moment, which, by the way, is exactly why we all have to take our shoes off at airport security today, kicked off a massive worldwide journalistic race to find out who was backing him.
It was like a giant, deadly puzzle. Step 1. The 9/11 attacks completely shake the world. Step 2. Richard Reed's shoe bomb attempt happens. Then, Step 3. A journalist over at the Boston Globe stumbles onto a major lead connecting Reed to a specific Pakistani cleric. That brings us to Step 4. Daniel Pearl, who was actually the South Asia bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal living in Mumbai at the time, decides he absolutely needs to investigate this connection firsthand.
So who was this cleric? His name was Mubarak Ali Jilani. On the surface, sure, he looked like a standard religious leader, but he was also the founder of a militant organization called Jamaat-ul-Fuqara. American agencies heavily suspected that under the guise of religion, this group was basically acting as a front, recruiting sharp minds and funneling them straight to al-Qaeda. Pearl wanted an interview with Jilani. His goal? To prove that al-Qaeda wasn't just boxed into Afghanistan, but actually had a sprawling, dangerous network of sleeper cells reaching all the way to Britain. Which brings us to Section 3, Into the Terrorist Trap.
Unfortunately, this relentless pursuit of the truth walked Daniel right into a carefully laid trap. To get access to Jilani, Pearl was introduced to a guy going by the name Bashir. They met up, talked daily, and slowly Pearl started to trust him. But here's the twist. Bashir was actually Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh. He was a highly educated, British-born terrorist with a notorious track record of kidnapping Westerners. Omar Sheikh never had any intention of taking Pearl to Jilani. No way. He was literally just using the cleric's name as bait. Once Pearl got into that white car, an incredibly fast, terrifying timeline kicked off. Day 1, he's kidnapped. For days, the CIA and Pakistani police are searching everywhere, turning the city upside down, but they find nothing. Then, on day 4, the silence is broken by a chilling ransom email. Now, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, by day 9, Daniel is murdered. It isn't until day 29 that a horrific video drops officially confirming his fate. And tragically, it took an agonizing 113 days for authorities to finally recover his remains. Let's go back to that day 4 ransom email for a second. It came from this anonymous account just calling itself Kidnapper Guy. Attached were these horrifying photos, Daniel bound in chains, a gun pointed right at his head, holding up a daily newspaper just to prove he was still breathing. The email laid out these completely impossible demands from a group calling itself the National Movement for the Restoration of Pakistani Sovereignty. They wanted the U.S. to free all Pakistani extremists currently in U.S. prisons, and they demanded the U.S. resume supplying F-16 fighter jets to Pakistan. To try and justify these wild demands, the kidnappers went into full propaganda mode. They put out these completely false accusations claiming Daniel was a CIA agent and later saying he was a spy for Israel's Mossad, basically trying to weaponize his Jewish identity to rally radical support. But the reality? The reality was that Daniel Pearl was just a deeply dedicated, truth-seeking investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal. And since the U.S. government firmly stuck to its policy of never negotiating with terrorists, everything ground to a terrifying, deadly standstill.
Section 4. The Tragic End.
This leads us to the grim, deeply heartbreaking conclusion of his captivity. For over a week, Daniel was held in this deserted hideout right on the outskirts of Karachi. Shackled, beaten, abused, the conditions were total nightmare. But get this, he still fought to survive. He actually tried to escape through a tiny toilet window and even desperately tried screaming to a passing vegetable seller out on the road. But he was caught both times. By February 1st, 2002, the terrorists realized the U.S. was absolutely not going to meet their demands, and their patience completely ran out.
On that final day, they forced Daniel in front of a video camera. With a gun to his head, they made him read a prepared statement blasting American and Israeli foreign policies. But the words that really echo through history are his incredibly brave acknowledgments of who he was. Looking straight into the lens, he stated, "My name is Daniel Pearl. I am a Jewish-American journalist. My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, and I am Jewish." And almost the second he stopped speaking, his captors brutally ended his life.
About 3 weeks later, a 3.5-minute video with a truly horrific title was dropped off at the American consulate. They had actually spliced his murder with footage of war and civilian casualties in the Middle East. It was literally murder being used as a direct propaganda weapon. And when that video inevitably leaked online, it spread like wildfire. It sent absolute shockwaves across the globe and planted a very real, deep-seated fear in journalists everywhere that, they could be next.
Section 5. The elusive quest for justice.
As you'd expect, a crime this brutal sparked a massive global manhunt. But the legal battle that came next, it's incredibly convoluted. First, investigators tracked the IP address from those ransom emails, which led them straight to Omar Sheikh and 3 others. By 2002, a Pakistani court actually sentenced them to death. Case closed, right? Well, no. Fast forward to 2007, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the notorious mastermind behind 9/11 who was locked up at Guantanamo Bay, shocks everyone. He confesses that he personally killed Pearl after Omar Sheikh handed him over to al-Qaeda. Because of that wild confession, in 2020, a Sindh court actually acquitted Omar Sheikh of the murder, ruling he'd basically already served his time for just the kidnapping.
Looking at the aftermath today, it is just full of systemic frustrations. For one, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's specific charges for Pearl's murder were eventually dropped by the U.S. Why? To avoid complicating the already massive 9/11 military tribunals. Global geopolitics just kept getting in the way. For instance, Daniel's father, Judea Pearl, ended up publicly praising India's Operation Sindoor when it killed a Jaish commander who is believed to be heavily involved in planning Daniel's kidnapping.
But honestly, the most staggering takeaway here is the number 23. Beyond the handful of guys initially arrested, intelligence suggests that at least 23 other individuals involved in the conspiracy, the abduction, and the murder of Daniel Pearl were never caught. Think about that. They totally slipped through the cracks of the global justice system and are more than likely still walking free today.
Ultimately, though, we have to look past the terror and remember the man himself. Daniel Pearl went into Pakistan armed with absolutely nothing but a pen, a notebook, and a fierce desire for the truth. This quote perfectly captures his legacy. Reporters in conflict zones don't just fill newspaper pages. They carry their lives in their hands to bring us the light of truth. And perhaps that's exactly why journalism is called the fourth pillar of democracy. His incredible courage in the face of unimaginable darkness proves that.
Which brings us to one final, critical question. With so many masterminds and accomplices successfully evading full justice more than 2 decades later, what does Daniel Pearl's story actually mean for the safety of truth seekers globally today? It's a stark, heavy reminder of the very real risks journalists take every single day just to keep us informed. Something to keep in mind the next time you read a dispatch from a dangerous corner of the world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep seeking the truth.